Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to dispense with the calling of the roll.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House is ready for further consideration of item number 23, House Bill 1130 by Chairman Farmer, relative to causes of action.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could, I'd like to roll this House Bill 1130 to the Hill of the calendar.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1132 by Chairman Farmer, relative to the opioid crisis.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1132 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1, filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does, this creates the opioid abatement fund. This is how we're going to handle settlements from 3 distributors and 1 manufacturer and the subsidiaries thereof of opioid monies that's going to come into the state. I want to thank those who's worked with me from the cities and counties and folks, all over the state with regards to lawyers who represent district attorneys and these settlements and stuff. So I'd like to say also that I believe this is an agreement. This would make the split 60-40, 60 to the state, 40 to the counties. I'll be happy to take any questions. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Farmer, I just want to tell you, many members may not know this, but the legislature rarely considers settlements as it relates to the last one was a tobacco settlement, and it didn't go very well. But thanks to Chairman Farmer and the AG's office, I think that this is going to be a good choice for our state. I think there's a couple of things I just want to clarify for the record. He mentioned a 40-60 split between the monies. It's the intent, it's my understanding of the intent of these settlements, once the settlements that are made, that this new committee abatement or this opioid committee, it's going to be their intent not to make every effort to not send the settlement money back to the same people that prescribe or that manufactured these drugs, so that of those 70% that are left, another 25% of that money will be coming back to our counties. And so I think it's really important that we understand the intent of the language. The AG is working very hard trying to settle these lawsuits. I also wanted to state for the record that there are several lawsuits that local counties have that are separate or state lawsuits, and those are preserved in this bill so that those who did have those lawsuits, those would still be there and settled apart from this. I just wanted to make sure that we said that for the record. I do think this is going to be good for all of our communities who have been dealing with this opioid problem since 2001 in our states, and this is going to give our local communities the resources and our state the resources it needs to try to reestablish a new norm post all the reforms that we've done over the years. But I wanted to just say that for the record. Thank you.
Chairman Farmer, you have anything? No, sir. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Can you explain, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing the local litigation up. Can you explain how this money is going to be divvied into Shelby County, because they had their own lawsuit that they won, if I'm not mistaken? So can you tell me how that split works? And from what I understand, just so you know, so I can put it on the record, if it's still in the same posture, I think it was causing some heartburn for Shelby County because it was causing them to be outside of their contractual agreement with their attorneys that they had hired to push the lawsuit.
Chairman Farmer.
And thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, this legislation only applies to McKesson Corporation, Cardinal Health, AmeriSource Bergen Corporation, and Johnson & Johnson. or any subsidiaries thereof. And I know that there were certain attorneys that were representing a large amount of cities and counties across the state, and that as I understand it, the way the legislation is written, it's not going to affect those lawsuits that are in place, especially the big one. I believe is the Indo lawsuit. That was a big one that we left out. So there's a carve out for that. And I don't know exactly which lawsuit or who was representing your area or your district representative. So I couldn't answer that question specifically, but I haven't had anyone from your district contact me to say, hey, we feel like we're being put in a bad situation or anything like that. So.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1132 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Boyd, aye. Todd, aye. Doggett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, 2 nays.
House Bill 1132, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 745 by Chairman Haston.
Chairman Haston, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request to roll this to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 419 by Chairman Sapicki and others relative to services covered by TennCare.
Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 419 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Sapicki, move passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman Kumar moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, TennCare currently covers chiropractic care up to the age of 18. What House Bill 419 does is allow chiropractic care to be covered above the age of 18 also, therefore helping our constituents with the ability to keep themselves healthy. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Sapicki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Ramsey, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to go out of order here and say that today we have the great pleasure of having 4 generations of Frasers in our audience here. If you would make Alice Fraser welcome She's a retired Inspector General of the Federal Department of Education for Texas and New York region. And with her, of course, is Rochelle Frazier, who calls her grandmama. And we have Amina Beard, who is Rochelle's daughter, and Kasim Beard, who is Amina's son. 4 generations. I'm out of order, sir, but thank you.
Out of order. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 419 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 78, 11 ayes, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 419 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 6 by Chairman Spicki and others relative to completion grants for Tennessee Promise Scholarship students.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 6 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Spicki moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 6 is a completion grant for the Tennessee Promise. Currently, we have a 51% graduation rate in Tennessee Promise. What this bill does is help those students that are at most risk to life coming up and bodying them, and therefore they would leave their educational aspirations in college. What this bill does is create a grant program to help them across the finish line so we can graduate more kids in Tennessee Promise. THEC's goal is that in 4 years on this pilot program, we come back to this General Assembly with a 70% graduation rate, which would lead the nation in education. Mr. Chairman, with that, I renew my motion. Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Spicki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a good bill, Mr. Sponsor. But Mr. Speaker, I was really, you hadn't ruled me out of order all year. So I want to recognize our gifted, newly elected election commissioner, Commissioner Kendra Lee, if you'll stand up. There she is. I thought she was right there. There she is. If you'll make her feel welcome, please.
Out of order. I have to like the applause. You're out of order. Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order also, but I'd like to wish one of our colleagues, Joe Towns, happy birthday today. Joe, happy birthday, my friend.
Any discussion on the bill? We'll have plenty of time tomorrow if he wants to give us a rendition of how he sings some songs. That would be wonderful. Anybody have any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 6 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Sparks, aye. Faison, aye. Lambert, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 6, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1433 by Chairman Holtzclaw and others relative to sentencing.
Chairman Holtzclaw, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that HB 1433 be rolled to the hill of the calendar.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 417 by Chair Lady Littleton relative to children. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1530.
Chair Lady Littleton moves substitute conform to Senate Bill 1530, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1530 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 1530 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This adds to severe child abuse, knowingly allowing a child to be within a structure where a Schedule II controlled substance list is present and accessible to the child. With that, I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Dixie.
I have a quick question for you. I noticed it says Schedule I drugs, and I think marijuana is included in that. Is there any minimum amount, or is it just that will trigger this, or is there like some amount that's in this? I didn't see any amounts in this particular piece of legislation, so I didn't know if someone was just caught with a little bit, or if it was something that was, whether it was a half pound or better. Is there something in there that makes that discrimination or determination?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is any of the Schedule I and cocaine, meth, and fentanyl, because children are beginning to pick up their parents' drugs and ingest them. So there was a little boy that was 4 that found his daddy's heroin and ingested it. So, and then there was a 10-month-old that found the parents' fentanyl. So it's any of the Schedule I plus the others that are listed.
Chairman Dixon.
Regardless of the amount.
Chair
I'm saying in Schedule I, I think I'm almost positive marijuana is included in Schedule I.
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This just says if it is present and accessible to a child.
Chairman Dixon.
All right, thank you.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair Lady Littleton, for bringing this bill. Would you agree that there's no acceptable amount of marijuana for a child to have in their system?
Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I would agree with that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Chairman Kershaw, anything else?
I just want to thank the Chair Lady for bringing the bill.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor, Senate Bill 1530, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As they remember, cast your vote. As they remember which change your vote. Camper, aye. Vaughn's and I. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 1530, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 427 by Chair Lady Littleton, relative to sexual offenses. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1531.
Chair Lady Littleton moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1531, proper second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1531 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 1531 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 is in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1531, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As they remember, cast your vote. As they remember, which change your vote. Lambert, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take Lamar's aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 1531, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 656 by Chairman Moon, relative to the Municipal Finance Officer Certification and Education Act of 2007.
Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage House Bill 656 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Moon moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a comptroller bill as amended, brings parity to the certified finance officers programs for cities and counties. And like all comptroller bills, this bill makes government work better. I renew my motion, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Moon renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Chairman Moon. One quick question on this one. So can you tell us, does it make any substantive changes for how this program is run currently? Can you give us just a couple quick highlights there?
Chairman Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. Yes, currently, the municipal certified finance officers have to do 24 hours of continuing education. The county certified finance officers only do 16. This will bring them together at 16. Also, it provides for a city to hire a certified public accountant with some limits on the amount of governmental experience they have, in lieu of having a person go through the Certified Municipal Finance Officers program. And it some outdated compliance dates also.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 66 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As the amendment vote is amendment change the vote. Mr. Clerk, please take a vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 656, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1039 by Chairman Vaughn, relative to employment security.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1039 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to defer to Finance Committee Amendment number 1. Move to withdraw Commerce Amendment number 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for what I know will be his incredibly astute explanation.
That's going to be hard on me to repeat, but Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 2, probably seconded, to the gentleman from Shelby County on his very astute description of the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? On the amendment or on the bill? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Absolutely.
Will the amendment number 2 make the bill?
Chairman Vaughn.
Let's see. Yes, sir, it will.
Yes. It makes the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I can speak on the amendment.
Representative Miller.
What is it weekly benefits currently?
Chairman
Vaughn. Presently, Representative Miller, they range from $30 a week to $275 a week, depending upon the amount that's been paid in and the wages that the employee has received.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When was the last time there was an increase on the benefits from 30 to 2? What was that number again?
Chairman, Representative Miller?
I think it's me.
Oh, Chairman Vaughn.
Mr. Miller, Representative Miller, it was 275 was the top number. The last time it was adjusted preceded me being here, sir.
Representative Miller.
I think that was probably in 2001. And if we would take that, I guess, $25 maximum increase, going back to 2001, today that probably would equate to a little over $400 a week.
Chairman Vaughn. Was there a question there, Representative Miller? Representative Miller.
Yes. Would you agree with that? Not agree with that?
Chairman Vaughn.
I will need to run that math by me again, Representative Miller.
Representative Miller.
Well, yes. Well, as I said, cost of living, the last time it was increased 2001. If we were to equate that today in reference to inflation's cost of living, that 275 would probably look like $400 a week. But right now we're looking in the middle of a pandemic, simply reducing 26 weeks to 12 weeks. That's cutting it in half. And then we want to increase it by $25. I think about what I could spend $25 on. Not much of anything, to be honest with you. But let's give an example of just simply going to the grocery store to spend $25. That doesn't go far. So I'm wondering why we want to reduce it from 26 weeks to 12 weeks, especially since we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And the other thing is, I'm still getting calls, and I'm sure many members continue to get calls from their constituents where they cannot even get a call back from the Department of Labor. We're still doing that. So is this bad timing for this legislation?
Chairman Vaughn.
I would submit it's not, sir. If you would allow me to go through my astute presentation, you'll see the origins of this bill. You'll see the reasons that we need it and the timing of it and other considerations that have been taken into account.
Representative Miller.
I will allow that, and we can discuss it further once you go through your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor, amendment number 2, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 3 by Representative Clemens, Mr. Speaker, it was not timely filed. The sponsors allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment takes into concern some of the concerns raised by my friend from Shelby County. This amendment would adjust those monthly or those weekly payments for inflation that haven't been adjusted in 20 years. It sets timelines in the legislation for responses from the Department of Labor. I, like all of my colleagues, have received several concerns from our constituents over the past year. None of them included, I'm being paid unemployment for too many weeks. They included that I'm not getting a timely response from the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor hasn't paid me. My appeal hasn't been heard. And this is not enough to move on. I introduced this amendment to address these concerns, but I have another, so I'll withdraw this amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, amendment number 3 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 4 by Representative Clemens, Mr. Speaker, it was not timely filed. The sponsors allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those listening, I would like to point out that this amendment keeps section 1, 3, 4, and 5 of the sponsor's bill as amended. That's 80% of his current language, but it adds language that increases the amount in section 1 annually, adjusted for inflation, holds working Tennesseans harmless. Several of you have had constituents reach out to you who have received overpayments at no fault of their own, and the state now wants to claw back those monies in the interest of equity. This would hold working Tennesseans harmless for any overpayment at the fault of the department. This requires that a labor department to examine claims within 14 days and promptly make a determination of their validity. The Labor Department shall notify working Tennesseans of the determination in writing within 3 days of any determination that they have made, and benefits shall be paid in 3 days, and requires all actions to be done in a prompt manner. Our unemployment system should work.
Sorry, Representative, that's the 1 minute. You've heard the motion. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 4. All those in favor of considering amendment number 4, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 25, 68 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having failed to receive the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 4 fails. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're looking at today is a unemployment trust fund solvency issue and a solvency repair plan. Prior to the pandemic, the U.S. Department of Labor issued a report in March of 2020 judging the solvency of state unemployment trust funds. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not real proud of being 31st in anything. That's where we landed, 31st in the country. And when the pandemic struck, as our unemployment claims went up, there was an estimate that our benefits would last for 12 weeks. Instead, we siphoned off money from the CARES Act. The federal government underwrote our state unemployment trust fund, and we were able to pay, and our balance was able to stay up. I don't know about y'all. I would like to have had the opportunity for the CARES Act money to be issued and used for other things to keep people employed, as opposed to paying unemployment benefits. So what are we doing? What are we doing here? We're indexing. It's a math equation when you boil down to it. How do we increase dollars in the fund? We do that in a couple of ways. Number one is we are going to index the benefits to the unemployment rate at the time. So based upon the economic conditions that the nation and the state is seeing, that will determine the duration of the benefits paid. Our proposal in front of you is that if the unemployment rate seasonally adjusted biannually is 5.5% or less, then the number of benefits are reduced to 12 weeks. Again, we've added a $25 increase across the board with this proposal. As unemployment rises for each 0.5% over 5.5, an additional week of benefits are added onto this. And when we first started this situation, looking at this legislation, it was a solvency issue. It was a trust fund balance issue. But as the spring this year has come along and we've seen more supplemental federal dollars pouring into the system, it's also becoming a workforce development, a workforce supply chain issue. We have people that are not being able to find laborers. As we read the news, our president is proposing additional federal dollars into the system. We'll wait and see how that works out. And so what we're doing here today is taking the Tennessee portion of benefits and restructuring it. But why? Because we want a trust fund to be a trust fund. We don't want it to be a maybe fund. We don't want it to be a situation where, hey, if I need these benefits, are they going to be there? We need it to be solvent. We need it to be strong. We need it to be there with our dollars, not necessarily underwritten by the federal government. And to my colleagues who have brought up a number of issues, this is not the last unemployment review that we're going to be doing. And I know that we've had some issues with constituents issues. I know that Representative Powell has brought forward a bill that on another issue with wage sharing that we're going to be looking at this summer. So what I would do is we will hold an unemployment workshop over the summer that you don't have to be a member of the Commerce Committee to come and attend. So we're going to start looking at some issues inside the unemployment realm, and we will make that available. So if anybody would like to come and sit in, learn more to discuss more issues that we'll be taking on in the next semester, I welcome you to do that. But today we're talking about trust fund solvency and a way to fix it on the state level. And I would submit to my colleagues from Shelby County, who I admire, that at one point during the pandemic, employees were receiving $875 a week. That's quite a benefit. So I understand it's $600 from the federal government and $275 from the state, but the check in the mailbox was $875. So I just want to point that out, and I'm standing for any questions, Mr. Speaker.
You renew your motion, sir.
First I will renew my motion, though.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as of today on jobsfortn.gov, 241 new jobs were posted. Currently in Tennessee, there are 247,529 current openings. We currently have roughly 41,000 people on continued claims and unemployment. The unemployment rate is 5%. If you click on those current openings, you have opportunities that include nurses. You have opportunities that include truck drivers. You have an opportunity for a technician at a surgical clinical center. You have workforce development, on and on and on, Mr. Speaker. So my point with that is, we in this legislature have created an environment for our economy to thrive. We're one of 7 states in the nation that actually grew economically in 2020. So if there isn't ever a time for us to address this issue, it's now. We are not Washington. We cannot print money. We cannot print money here. So we have to ensure the solvency of these programs to ensure those that fall on hard times are able to gain access to unemployment. When I was 15, my dad started a new company and he was on unemployment. He left his employer, not on his own accord, but had to leave his employer and had to start a new company. And we were on unemployment with a family of 5. So I understand the challenges, but unemployment is a bridge to the next step. Currently, and I just confirmed this with Tia, currently right now, the max benefit is $275 from the state, and you're getting an additional $300 no matter what level you're at. You're getting an additional $300 from the federal government, which is $575. That runs through September. So why would I go out and look for an employment and look for an opportunity when I'm making $575 a week? You have so many opportunities in this state to go gain a career and gain employment. Everybody in our district has employers that simply can't find people to work. One of our great restaurants in Knox County, Copper Cellar Calhoun's, 27 restaurants. He needs 300 employees today, but he can't find people to work because of the subsidies being paid by the federal government. The system we're in is unsustainable. So, Chairman, thank you for bringing this bill during this time. And I know the effective date is sometime out, but you've made the comparison in finance to Joseph and the biblical story of Joseph in addressing what we can right now in the years of plenty. So if there is a famine and if there are hard times and we have to make adjustments, we're able to do that. And that fund is there to help people be that bridge to the next opportunity. Now is the time to address this. And if someone is listening to this and they need employment or they're looking for opportunities, there are 247,000 jobs available in the state because of the work this body has done. Thank you for the bill. I fully support it.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman Zachary. I know that there's a couple of 100,000 jobs available in the hospitality industry this weekend. I know what we all hear the rhetoric that says, oh, well, if they were good paying jobs, more people would apply for them. We had 500 jobs advertised, job fair in Collierville this weekend at United Technologies Carrier Plant for machinists, electricians, skilled labor jobs, because we can't find enough people to fill them. I believe it was March 1995 that Insituform Technologies made a management decision that probably still haunts them today. They let one of their star employees go. That was me. I went to unemployment, but you know what? I quickly realized that it was not going to, that there was not enough money there to be a lifestyle. It was not going to allow me to sustain my family, but what it was going to do was going to be some money to handle some incidentals while I got my act together. I certainly didn't expect myself to be there 6 months later. And so I understand what this fund is about. I understand what the intentions are. I've been a beneficiary of it. That's why I want to so fiercely protect it. That's why it needs to be there. Anyway, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've, like you, I've been on unemployment, Mr. Sponsor, and I've, it is a bridge, but it's a very shaky and it's a unstable and it's a pretty scary bridge too, when you don't know, when you got a family to support and you don't know when you're going to have a job the next time. Right now, we have a pretty good job situation in Tennessee, but it hasn't always been that way, and it likely will not always be that way. We might end up having these problems or difficulties, high unemployment, high difficulty in finding jobs in the future. You mentioned you'll be having studies this summer. You mentioned the possibility of federal funds coming in. Now, I want a good, stable, and trust fund as well. I have been on committees that have had that as their jurisdiction since I've been here, and I've been advocating it since I was a freshman here. Now, if we have all these other possibilities, why do we want to start punishing workers right away when we can look and we can have all these other things this summer in the coming months to try to possibly head off this, what I regard as a travesty to working people in this state, in order to see if we can have other alternatives for a trust fund.
Chairman Vaughn.
I will take exception to the fact that you said this bill punishes workers. It doesn't do anything of the sort. The other issue that I would advise my other colleague from Shelby County is, in the language of this bill, it takes effect in December of 2023, which is frankly further out than I'm comfortable with. I wish it would start sooner. But the reason behind that is that two things. Number one is we wanted to let this shock to the system get through the system somewhat, so that we weren't going to punish the workers, as you allude to. But the other fact is we've got to set this system up, that we've got to give the department time to hire vendors, restructure it, program the system, so that we can start down this road. It's important that we get them started today, even though, frankly, the trust fund won't feel the benefits of it for many years from now. So if we don't get started today, we will never get there.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to stand by this. I think this punishes workers. We need a good trust fund. We need a good business climate, absolutely, in the state. But we shouldn't do either one on the backs of regular working people in the state. And this will do it with the max 12 weeks of unemployment benefits. You're going to have people who will end up on looking for federal government assistance, for food stamps, for more assistance. We're going to have people, I will say, inclined to look at illegal ways to find sustenance for their family. we'll have many other problems coming up in this that we don't anticipate right now. This is something we don't need to have right now. It will be a punishment to the working people in this state, and I will definitely be voting against this bill. Thank you.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you for your comments.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have some questions about how our unemployment trust fund has become uninsolvent or insolvent as was described. Because right now I'm looking at the week ending April 24th, 2021, and this has been a consistent ratio that I've seen in every unemployment report that I've been checking and has been provided to us by the Tennessee Department of Labor Workforce. Total payments made, $72,527,670. Of that $72 million and change, $63 million paid by the federal government. Tennessee is paying a very small portion of unemployment claims made in Tennessee. So how and why now is our unemployment trust fund insolvent or doing so poorly, Mr. Sponsor?
1 second, Chairman Vaughn. Representative Hall, for what purpose, please?
Mr. Speaker, my apologies for breaking protocol, but I've got constituents that drove 163 miles today to be with us, Richard and Melinda Burnett. Could we make them please feel welcome, please?
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my dear friend from Davidson County, we're referencing the U.S. Department of Labor study released in March of 2020 that spoke to the trust fund solvency issue. And then early on in the pandemic, before the CARES Act came out, we noticed how the funds were running out of the fund that were replaced eventually with CARES Act money. And this becomes a difference of philosophies, frankly. Do we want to remain as dependent upon the federal dollars controlling this program, or do we want to try to run it and manage it ourselves? I pretend that I would rather us have more control over our own destiny. And I'm not one of these guys that says, oh, the feds are all bad, because I look at how much of our state budget federal dollars are. I'm realistic. I understand that. But at the same time, I do understand that those federal dollars come with all kinds of strings that, depending upon who's ever in charge of the administration, whether it be our previous president or whether we be this president, have drastically different policies in the way of looking at things. And so for us to be able to control our destiny as much as possible, I think it's important that we maintain our hands on the wheel.
Representative Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that. However, the reality is that we are always going to rely on the federal government to balance our budget. We're always going to rely on the federal government to provide us with necessary monies for key programs. We unfortunately turn away free federal money. That's our own tax dollars in the form of other areas like TennCare expansion, but I won't go into that. And but just lastly, I want to address this false narrative that people across Tennessee are sitting at home trying to milk the system and not getting jobs. Because right now, the max payment per week is $275 a week. That's $6.88 an hour. That's less than the minimum wage. That's $1,100 a month, $13,200 a year. That is embarrassing. For us to sit here and claim that people are sitting at home instead of working in the state of Tennessee because they're getting more money from unemployment is absurd. Even if you raise it up to this $575 mark, that's $27,600 a year. The federal poverty limit or federal poverty level is $26,500 a year for a family of four. So let's stop this false narrative that people are sitting at home because they can make more on unemployment and use that as an excuse to pass this bill cutting the time for unemployment benefits. That is disrespectful to working Tennesseans. The unemployment system should work for working Tennesseans. Yet we're choosing to pick a fight with them during the worst unemployment, during the worst economic time because of a pandemic in history, and it's not even going to go into effect for 2 years. We haven't even increased the amount of weekly payments in 20 years. There are real problems facing Tennessee families, and if you try to shift the blame to working families in Tennessee, that is a dangerous game you're playing. It's a false narrative, and it's disrespectful to hardworking families out there who rely on this system. Sponsor has relied on it at times. My colleague has relied on it at times, and I'm sure others in here may have relied on it at times. The unemployment system is in place for a reason. So don't use the false narrative that people want to make less than the minimum wage as an excuse for them not filling jobs. Workforce issues in this state have been an ongoing problem. This isn't new. There have been open jobs in the state of Tennessee for a long time. One of the biggest barriers for us recruiting jobs to Tennessee is workforce training and education. That's why we pass bills every year for free community college, free technical college. That's to address workforce issues. So don't use these same workforce issues as an excuse to cut unemployment. A lifeline for Tennesseans. It's their money. They earned it. They paid the taxes. I am sick and tired of us pointing the finger at working families. This is an embarrassment. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to cut the time limit for unemployment, then go right ahead. I dare you. That's what you're doing. Stand up for working families. Let's make the system work for them like we do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Vaughn, is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, there's been a term used here today from both my impassioned colleagues from across the aisle that keeps talking about us harming working families. Working families. This, whenever we talk about what's wrong with the unemployment system, we're talking about the people who are not working. And like it or not, with any government entitlement system, there will be waste, fraud, and abuse. It's not everyone who applies. It's not every situation. There's a broad array of situations out there, but it does indeed happen. I'll just have to share this with you. Believe it or not, when you look on the interweb and people are on the Twitter talking about this issue, they get pretty passionate. Now, the one that I thought it was interesting, one that I received that said, hey, I would not have been able to afford to stay on unemployment if it wasn't for the federal benefit. And I thought that basically summed it up for a number of people of what the system that we have is creating, is that this is a lifestyle alternative. That's not the origins of this bill by any means. This origins of this bill is financial mathematics on how to make sure that a trust fund is available to the citizens of Tennessee when they need it. That's the origins of this bill. But we have seen our country over the last 6 months devolve into a situation to where people are counting and relying on the checks from the government as opposed to pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and achieving the American dream. And that's something that's disturbing. It's not every person. It's by any means, I'm not impugning anyone, but there are examples of it out there that I think we all need to be cognizant of.
Representative Parkinson.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Sponsor, my colleague from Shelby County, I was a little confused because I thought, and maybe I misunderstood, I've been misunderstanding a lot of stuff this part of the session. Maybe I misunderstood when the governor gave the State of the State address and he said that our unemployment trust fund is the most solvent in the union. Did I mistake that?
Chairman Vaughn.
Representative, I can neither attest to the words that came from the governor, nor their intent, nor your understanding of how you received them. So I have nothing to.
Representative Parkinson.
Well, I can attest to it. The governor said we were the most solvent in the union, or one of the most solvent in the union when it came to our unemployment. And he bragged about it, and he said that this saves the businesses, quote unquote, a spike in their unemployment insurance policy costs. You don't remember that? You clapped for it, stood up and clapped for it.
Chairman Vaughn.
If that is indeed, and I'll believe you, my colleague from Shelby County, if those were the words, that was as a result of the infusion of the CARES Act money into it to stabilize it. It was the diversion of federal dollars into that fund. It was not the fund standing alone in pre-pandemic state.
Representative Parkinson.
So the governor didn't give us the full story then.
Chairman Vaughn.
Representative, the governor gave you his position on matters, and how you received that and understood that is up to you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And because I didn't hear the part about the additional money coming from the feds, because it would have made it it would gave us a different perspective. And I'm sure there was money coming in, but isn't there more money coming in from the feds also that can be used for unemployment also from American Rescue?
Chairman Vaughn.
The American Rescue Plan has not yet been fully vetted, but there is discussions about what's going to come with it. But as many things, Representative, there is no such thing as free money. Money comes from somewhere, and if somebody says they're going to give it to you, 99 out of 100 times, they're going to have strings attached to it. And I believe, from what I'm reading about the American Rescue Plan, or it may be the American Families Plan, it may be one of the different plans that are out there of these trillions of dollars that are being printed, those dollars will come with a string. And it boils down to a question of, are those strings that are attached what we as a body want to have attached and how we want to manage our affairs here? That's what it all boils down to.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I completely understand that, and I'm sure that every member of this body, the governor's administration, both speakers, both chambers understand that, because we are the most dependent state on federal dollars in the union. So we understand that strings come attached, but we still take those dollars. Mr. Sponsor, my number one constituent issue is unemployment. Above everything is unemployment. Every day, every single day, my assistant talks about the amount of calls that are coming in regards to people not being able to receive or tap into our system or receive the benefits that they should receive from unemployment. We still have some cases that go back. Well, we did. I don't know if we still do now today, but we had cases that went back to March, where people didn't receive their unemployment benefits. And it's not just my constituents, because we get calls from constituents in East Tennessee, constituents that have Republican members, and so on and so forth. But we still help them, because these are working Tennesseans, not just the fact that they're working Tennesseans, these are Tennesseans. And I've heard, not just from yourself, but from other members too, that alluded to the fact that Tennesseans are skirting work in order to make this a lifestyle of living on the unemployment benefits. But I'll let you answer this if you want to. How do you qualify to receive a check from unemployment?
Chairman Vaughn.
Well, sir, I believe you're gainfully employed for a period of time, and you qualify based upon the wages that you have paid and the taxes that your employer have also paid. And before I come, just so you know, Representative, your office is not the only one that handles unemployment cases. My office has handled over 170 of them, making sure that people get their benefit. This bill is not a referendum nor an endorsement of the Department of Labor's handling of unemployment benefits. This is a restocking of the unemployment trust fund bill. So I just want to get that out there.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. Let me further qualify. In order to receive unemployment, yes, those things that you mentioned, but you also have to qualify by looking for work every single week, every single day, and send that information in to be verified to the Department of Labor in Tennessee. And I would submit to you also, respectfully, that if your office has handled 170 unemployment complaints, then I'm sure that you've heard these stories coming from these individuals that are calling you about their challenges with not receiving unemployment, such as I'm about to lose my house, such as how do I feed my child, such as I don't have gas, such as, we can't survive like this. But yet you're the one that's sponsoring the bill to reduce it. That's a bit surprising to me. 170 cases. I appreciate you taking care of these 170 families that needed your help, but you're reducing their ability, if they're ever in the situation again, to receive those benefits. It's almost like we celebrate low wages here. All these jobs that were mentioned, these thousands of jobs, everybody don't qualify for those jobs. Everybody does not qualify for those jobs. Everybody don't live in the area where those jobs are. Some people live in remote areas. Some people can't even get to the job because they can't get their unemployment so they can have gas to get to the job. Y'all, we are leaving out the human factor. And then we say this is people, and I think y'all, I think it's insulting, honestly. And I'm not saying from you, I'm just in general. It's insulting to say that someone wants to make a lifestyle out of the crumbs that they receive from the state of Tennessee in unemployment benefits. That's insulting. That's insulting. We're insulting our own people by saying that. And we should be ashamed of ourselves. And so, Mr. Sponsor, I get it, but this is bad timing. We got more money coming down in the next few months than we can imagine, than we've ever had infused into the state. There are many opportunities for us to shore up our trust fund through some of that money. We know it's going to be some money in there for unemployment. And, what we're doing couldn't be at a worse time. I know it's out a couple of years, but the introduction of this couldn't be at a worse time. And I'm going to be voting no on this bill. It's bad. It's just bad business for our citizens because we've given millions and millions and millions of dollars to businesses that come into this state. Let me say that again. We've given millions and millions, but ain't nobody talking about cutting those incentives to those businesses that we give to their corporate welfare. But we're talking about cutting the struggling people, unemployment benefits in half. It's a bad idea. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know who else I've heard from other than people who've been having problems receiving their unemployment checks? That's business owners. Business owners who can't find anybody to work. Business owners who are scheduling interview after interview that they're scheduling phantom interviews that all they're doing is checking the box so that they can say that they've sought work. And they're asking us, what can we do? What can you do to help us? That's the other side of the coin that frankly, it's disingenuous for us not to look at both sides of it. And so what this bill does, again, stabilizes the trust fund for when it's time, when people need it, to seek a better life, to get out of a bad situation that they find themselves in. And it's also a side effect of that, whether it's intended or not, will be the fact that our workforce should thrive and should increase. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I just want to read
just from Thursday, September 17th, 2020. Based on newly released projections from the University of Tennessee's Boyd Center, the tax premium paid by the state's employers would have increased by at least 300% in 2021 had the resources not been invested early. And that is resources from the financial stimulus accountability, and that's from coronavirus. Additionally, Tennessee businesses would have had their unemployment taxes raised by $837 million. Employer premiums, which employers pay the premiums, placing an enormous burden on businesses. Tennessee would have to transition from enjoying the lowest taxable wage base and tax table as of January 2020 to the highest in 2021. I will tell you that, speaking from firsthand experience, we could hire 20 employees tomorrow if they came in. Company after company after company is giving bonuses just for people to come in and apply for jobs. Giving bonuses, $500, $1,000, just to get people to come in. It's low wages, it's minimum wage. And I say over and over, I don't know many companies that pay minimum wage anymore. So let's get minimum wage, or let's get wages up to $15 an hour. So we go to $15 an hour in most companies with full benefits. No one still comes in the door to apply. Every time there's an announcement from the governor's office on new companies coming into the state, we had one just recently in the last 2 or 3 weeks in Knoxville. 750 jobs by Amazon in Knox County. I'm like, don't bring any more jobs. Don't bring any more companies here. We don't have the workforce to fill the jobs we have. So my hat is off to you. I know this has been a challenge for you. You and I have talked about this, but the false narrative is there are not jobs to fill the workforce that we have. So again, I support this, and I will be voting yes as loudly as I possibly can.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll make a motion to limit debate to 5 minutes.
That's a motion. Is it per 5 minutes total or per person?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll make a motion to limit debate to 5 minutes per member.
Per member, 5 minutes. Any objection? All right, we're on the board. All those in favor of limiting debate to 5 minutes per member, vote aye. All those opposed, vote no. Vaughn, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 68, 23 nays.
Motion passes. Debate's limited to 5 minutes per person. If you could, at the start of the debate, can you put 5 minutes on the board? When 5 minutes cuts off, debate is over. Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You said that this is a trust fund bill. What is the proper amount that should be in a trust fund that will keep it solvent, or that you would feel comfortable with as a state?
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is dependent upon the conditions that we see at the time, Leader Dixie. Right? The number varies depending upon the situation that we have, who's in. And so what I refer to is a matrix that the U.S. Department of Labor uses. And frankly, I could have made something up and told you, but I can't give you the exact amount.
Chairman Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that kind of alludes to my point that we're making here. There's a goal that we'll never reach because we have no idea what that goal is. I understand we want to replenish and keep it solvent. Mr. Speaker, I can't hear myself think. You said that you want to keep it solvent, but if there's a goal that we don't know what it is and we keep moving the post, I could support the bill if there was a goal in mind that we have, but it seems like we're shooting here at the dark. And I wanted to kind of respond to my colleagues from Knox County and Davidson County that I don't think the issue is that we don't have the jobs. It seems like from what I'm hearing from my colleague from Knox County, it's a workforce development issue. And I think that we should put more money into training to get people that can fulfill these jobs. Because apparently, like I said, we have 240,000 jobs that need to be filled. But apparently they don't have the skill set to obtain these jobs. So I think that there's something that we should look at. And I think that if we did have a goal of knowing what the proper amount should be to having this trust fund, that would probably be more acceptable and be a little bit more transparent about what we're really trying to do here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Vaughn. You have anything to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will sponsor yield?
Courageously, I will.
Yeah, thank you. I just, time is short. I just follow up on the previous questioner's questions. So do we not have a number of the shortfall that we're trying to fill in the unemployment trust fund?
Chairman Vaughn.
Representative, given the fact that the way that we have deployed federal benefits that have come our way, which hopefully within 2 years we will have come through the pandemic and hopefully normalize the situation some. It's difficult at this point in time to pinpoint a number. I could tell you, say, hey, we need $1.5 billion in there, and we've only got $950 million. But given all the factors and the variables within these equations, we've got about, it's quite the polynomial we have working here within this equation of things of inflows to it and withdrawals from it.
Representative Stewart.
Is there any expert, any person at UT or in the state of Tennessee or anywhere else, anywhere in the United States or the world that's actually put a number to this polynomial who said the amount of money we have to put in the trust fund is this number? Has anybody done that you know of?
Chairman Vaughn.
Upon our request, the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research has worked with the Department of Labor to run scenarios based upon conditions that we have. But again, will the same input be there 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Will we have all the same revenue sources or revenue streams feeding this trust fund? Do we have the same unemployment levels? Do we have new rules for qualification? All of those are variables that at this point in time are pretty difficult to say.
Representative Stewart.
Well, I didn't hear a number, and I gather that no matter how many times I ask, no one in this chamber is going to hear what exact amount of money we're trying to raise here by cutting unemployment benefits. One number I see is the fiscal note. Looks like they're saying $33 million a year. Okay, so if that's the hole we're trying to fill, we have over, according to the department's website, $1.2 billion in the rainy day fund. Instead of cutting unemployment benefits in half, why don't we just put the $33 million into the fund?
Chairman Vaughn.
Representative, I respect your intelligence immensely. And if that's the policy answer that you would like to propose, we'll be back here again next January, and you can propose that. What I'm offering to you today is a proposal that I believe is the best and most prudent way to solve this issue. You may not agree with it. I understand that. People obviously don't all agree with it, but this is the proposal that's in front of us today.
Representative Stewart.
I think my time's running out. On a different note, don't we have a cap right now on when your unemployment benefits in Tennessee ends? And the reason I ask is I don't understand the relationship some people have talked about between people not coming down and getting jobs from Amazon or what have you, and what we're talking about today. Because, right, unemployment benefits end in our state. You have them for a certain number of weeks and then they're over. Isn't that correct? If that's the case, doesn't the system currently create a situation where there's a great incentive to get those jobs as soon as possible?
Chairman Vaughn.
Presently, Representative, at 6 months is the Tennessee limit. However, with the federal extensions that we've seen throughout the system, again, you're asking for a set of given knowns that each week there's a new announcement of more money coming for whatever reason that continues this cycle of federal dollars feeding into this. And so, but the state's unemployment system stops at 6 months.
Representative Stewart.
Right. I understand the issue about the federal government, and we're just talking about the state. I guess my concern is today, this bill is being sold as an effort to fix the trust fund, but we've received no.
All right, out of time. Sorry, that was your 5 minutes. Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was put on the governor's CARES Act stimulus committee to protect the funds that we're getting from the federal government. And we had $2.3 billion to spend, and we wanted to spend it wisely. We had a group that was made up of several of us and several of the governor's staff. I think we did a very good job, and we spent that money, in my opinion, very wisely on a lot of it for nonprofits, for small businesses, for hospitals and healthcare people that were struggling. But we tried from the very start to save a big chunk of that money for our unemployment trust fund. We were waiting to see if we could actually use that money. And in the end, we got to put in a $1 billion figure to the unemployment trust fund to keep it stable, which I think is what you're trying to do today. You're trying to keep this where when we really, really need it for our workers, it will be there. And I think that's what we did. Another thing that I want to tell you is I'm in the trucking business, as a lot of you know, and last year when the pandemic hit, we run about 650 trucks. We had about 50 trucks empty with no drivers. It hit, and our business fell off for quite a bit. But our business is booming right now. So is all the other businesses I know of in the trucking business. We've got over 100 trucks sitting today with no drivers. And we're paying a lot of money. In fact, our number one driver last year made over $91,000. So there's a lot of money to be made in trucking. But I think, as it was talked about earlier about human nature, when you get a mailbox check every week, human nature is you're going to sit at home. And I think it's time that our people, we cut some of this back and our people go back to work. There are jobs out there. There are good paying jobs out there. And we have got to cut out this giveaway money and put our people back to work. And I appreciate you doing this bill. Thank you, sir.
Out of order. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First and foremost, it's not giveaway money. These people worked into the system, paid into the system. Their employer paid for them working into the system. So it's not a giveaway money, first and foremost on the record. Representative sponsoring this, I know your heart. I don't think you would do anything to hurt people. But to live in Nashville, Tennessee, just to survive is $2,200 a month. I've been around this General Assembly and state government since 1989. I came in here as an intern. I worked as a Senate staffer. I've worked government relations firm. I've worked for the governor. I've been an elected official. I'll tell you, in the 30 plus years I've been around state government, this is the worst constituent service problem I've ever seen in 30 plus years in government. I mean, I've never seen anything bungled so much in 30 plus years as unemployment. You know, and it's people trying to put food on the table, people trying to keep lights on, people trying to keep a roof over their children's head. And it's been bungled. So what we're doing here today is insult to injury. And I don't think you mean that. but it is. You know, I get calls every day from multitude of people's district in this room. I don't care where they're from. They're working Tennesseans that are unfortunately out of work currently. Like you said, you've been in that situation before. You didn't volunteer for that situation. It happened to you. But fortunately, you have the skills and the education. It probably didn't take you very long to be scooped up real quick, which someone should. There's a lot of people in our society that aren't as fortunate as you are. And it may not be as easy. But for us to say what we're doing here today is right and to justify it, I mean, I've got restaurants out my way that are paying $15 an hour plus tips to get somebody in. You know what? Those employers are still making a nice profit and still making money. But for people to stand up and say it's a giveaway, I mean, that's sad. I mean, we should be addressing the problem of what took this administration so long to address unemployment instead of cutting people. And, you know, we take federal money. We love getting that federal money. We hate the federal government, but we spend that federal money every time we can get our little hands on it in this state. But we're happy to get it here in this state, but we call it a handout. Well, we're the biggest welfare state in the union. We get more than anybody else per capita in the entire country. But I don't hear anyone standing up on this floor saying the state of Tennessee needs to quit taking handouts. So, Representative, again, I know your heart. I know what you stand for. This is wrong. We should be addressing what the administration's problem is about getting checks out the door to the people who deserve their unemployment checks, to pay their rent, to feed their children, and to pay the light bill, which I'm still got an email full in my email box of people today that have not been serviced by this state government and the failures of this administration. So please address that.
Chairman Varner.
Thank you, and to my friend and colleague. The one thing that I would point out that I believe there's a little bit of inaccuracy is the fact that the employers are the ones that pay into the system. That's where this comes from. So let's get to that point. But again, I understand the issue that a lot of people are having with the Department of Labor's performance under this pandemic. I do understand that.
No, it's not.
That's why I've said this is the initial salvo of us looking at a broken system. I want you to come along beside me. We're going to have opportunities to work together to make our unemployment system work better for everyone, employers and citizens alike. That's why I said we're going to have an unemployment workshop this summer. It's one of those things where we've sent a bill to summer study and we're actually going to study it. We're going to look into it and see how we can make this system better. We're going to talk to the department and find out how we can indeed help them provide the constituent service that we believe our constituents have. So this is the opening salvo. We're going to be looking at this in the coming, in the next session. And if we have to take sessions after that, we will continue to do so. But I appreciate your comments.
Mr. Clerk, can you explain the 5-minute rule to the representative from Davidson County, please?
Mr. Speaker, when a member asks questions of the sponsor, the time consumed is taken out of the time that is allowed for the member to speak.
5 minutes. Your 5 minutes are up. 5 minutes are up. Well, the clock started at 5 and it went to 0. Next up, Representative Boyd. Representative Boyd. Mr. Clerk, you want to explain that one more time?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the motion made and adopted by this body, time limit on debate was set for 5 minutes per person. The member can choose to use that 5 minutes to speak for the constant 5 minutes, or they may ask questions of the sponsors. The response of the sponsor counts towards the member's 5 minutes.
Mr. Clerk, can you reference what book that's referenced out of, please?
Mr. Speaker, that's section 96, section 95, 4 of the Mason's Manual.
Representative Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman, when you first brought this bill and explained it to me and Chairman Powers in Commerce Bill Review, the first thing that I thought was, why didn't we think of this sooner? And if the pandemic taught us nothing else, it taught us how fickle the unemployment trust fund is, how quickly it can be depleted, and how paramount it is that we make sure that it's solvent and well-funded. This piece of legislation is one of the most well thought out pieces of legislation that I've seen in the labor sector since I've been in the General Assembly. It's common sense legislation, guys. If unemployment rate is high, the benefits are longer than they are if the unemployment rate is low, which they're shortened. And you manage to do this while increasing benefits and strengthening the solvency of this unemployment trust fund in Tennessee. Chairman Vaughn, well played. Well played.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Johnson of Knox. You're on the list. We'll come back to you. Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be quick. I just also have to stand like some of my colleagues. I'm really offended by the intimation that Tennesseans are lazy, or that people don't want to go back to work because they're living large on unemployment. And I'm compelled to stand up for, at least for House District 13, and say that is absolutely, the people in House District 13 are not staying home because they're living large on unemployment, and they're not lazy. And I've spent hours and days and weeks and months talking to them and having conversations about their struggles on the telephone. And to minimize that, and then the struggles and the pain that they're going through, is just incomprehensible to me. And to act like many of your constituents are just lazy and not wanting to go back to work is unacceptable to me. And all I ask is that in the next 24 plus hours, when the vote comes to vote to increase your compensation, I hope you think about cutting struggling Tennessee families while you do that vote.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, and to the representative from Knox County, I appreciate your perspective on things, but I do take a little bit of exception to the fact that I think that when we watch the replay of this tape, at no time did I ever say that Tennesseans were lazy, nor did I ever say that any Tennessean was lazy. So, but I understand you're entitled to your opinion, and we're trying to do something to ensure that a trust fund can be trusted. But thank you for your comments.
Representative Johnson.
I agree you did not say lazy. That was my interpretation of not willing to go back to work, or rather choosing to stay at home and get unemployment. And so to me, that's indicating lazy. But thank you for clarifying.
Chairman Vaughn, anything? Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Is there objection? I'll just go ahead. There's objection to previous question. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk, has every member voted? Has any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 68, 25 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting on House Bill 1039 as amended. Those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 69, 25 nays.
House Bill 1039 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 226 by Chairman Vaughn and others relative to medical laboratories. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 982.
Chairman Vaughn moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 982, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move passage of Senate Bill 982 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 982 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope we don't need a 5-minute clock on this one. This bill takes a lesson learned from the pandemic and codifies it. We had a workforce development issue having to do with medical laboratories pre-pandemic. We saw that illustrated by some of the delay times in getting testing ramped up. What this bill does is it codifies the requirements of the governor's executive order and requires the same training for private medical laboratories that our state public health laboratories have. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn reads his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, Representative, I'm just curious, do employees of medical laboratories, do the employer pay in unemployment for the work of employees who are actually working at the medical laboratory?
That's a good try, but that's outside the topic of the bill. It's not about unemployment. You have another question other than that? All right, Representative Mitchell, it's about medical laboratories, not unemployment. That's passed.
No, it's a legit question. Since I had 100:05 left on my time limit that you took out.
Out of order. Cut him off. Next question. Anybody else? Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 982, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 74, 19 nays.
Senate Bill 982, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 443 by Chairman Vaughn and others relative to medical education. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 298.
Chairman Vaughn moves substitute form of Senate Bill 298, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 298 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 298 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to withdraw Amendment number 2. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 2, filed as House Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 3 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 4 by Chairman Williams. Mr. Speaker, was not timely filed.
Representative Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment that came over in the Senate bill is identical to this amendment. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 4 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this bill in front of you today is a rural medical workforce development bill. It's one that we've been chasing for a long time, and I want to thank the governor for funding a portion of it in his appropriations amendment. And then I know that our budget team went in and fought for additional dollars, but it commits $4.5 million to establish new medical residencies in the state of Tennessee, which will be managed by the state's medical schools. In this state, we're very blessed in the fact that we have so many medical schools, but at the same time, we don't have the same amount of residencies for these doctors to continue their graduate medical education. This bill will provide 140 new slots for doctors to move into areas that will assist and take up specialties that we find are needed throughout our less populated areas. And so with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question here. One of the premises of this bill was to drive these doctors and residencies out to our underserved communities. Is there anything in the bill, some type of reporting mechanism that requires these colleges and universities to track the success of that?
Chairman Vaughn.
The reporting is not necessarily in the bill. It will be reporting that will be easily tracked. A portion of this, again, the premise of the bill is that through UT and ETSU, we're going to be building residencies in general practice, family practice, pediatrics, and those are fields that aren't necessarily the top of the list when it comes to hospital-administered medical residencies. But on top of this, what our budget team did was they negotiated and worked through LMU, a DO program, not an MD program, but a DO program, to set up some hospital programs in each of the grand divisions. Some in Greene County, some in Putnam County, and then one, I believe, in whatever county, Henry County. And so there's going to be within rural hospitals in those areas. And so this program will be, it is as it is advertised, and we'll be able to bring a report because we hope this will be continuing on. These are recurring dollars, and we're very glad to track that.
Representative Spicki.
Thank you for that response.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Vaughn, for working on this. This is something you've been working on for many years. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this process is that we find that 84% of doctors who perform their residency stay where they do their residency. And so by being able to expand this program in the state, not just at UT and ETSU, but also through LMU in these rural counties, what we're able to do is get subspecialty and specialty people in this field into our rural communities where it's very difficult to get people to come. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to try to get some more residents here and provide good quality health care to our rural areas as well. Thank you.
Chairman Vaughn.
Nothing on that one. Thank you, sir.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to echo Chairman Williams' thoughts that ever since I've been here, I've had medical societies and faculty at UT and pretty much everyone else, at least in my county, advocating what you're presenting in this bill. So I appreciate you bringing it to us.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, sir. While I hail from the District of Champions, today I'm from Representative Shaw's district, a rural area that's still not enjoying the same economic bounty that everyone, that a lot of other areas of the state are. So this is one of my opportunities to play a little offense as opposed to playing defense. And it's very, I appreciate the folks from UT. I appreciate the governor's staff, and again, our budget team that have worked hard to be able to put this into play. And there's been a lot of folks pulling on that rope for a number of years.
Representative Shaw, your name was called.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the sponsor for the legislation. I think it's certainly going to enhance our rural communities, and that's basically what we are looking to do. So thank you for this, and we'll look forward to reaping the benefits. Thank you.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, I asked you this earlier, but I want to make sure for the record that with the amendment we put on, we did not take Vandy or Meharry out of this program at all.
Chairman Vaughn.
Vandy and Meharry will not be managing the program, yet it is open to their students. Just because it's going to be a program fostered by UT and ETSU and LMU, the medical school graduates from any medical school in the state of Tennessee, it is open to them.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 298 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, nay.
Senate Bill 298, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call it next bill. Hang on, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, as an announcement for the body, the clerk's office has prepared a consent calendar 2 in an effort to get everyone's congratulatory items passed by the end of session. We've made a consent calendar 2 for today, also a message calendar 2 for this evening to try to get those items bounced back over to the Senate. That is available in Dashboard now, so you can go ahead and start reviewing that consent calendar. It has also been emailed to every member of the body.
Very good. Call it next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1246 by Representative Calfee and others relative to the Students' Rights to Know Act. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Calfee, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move and substitute to Senate Bill 1521.
Representative Calfee moves substitute form Senate Bill 1521, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1521 on third and final consideration.
Representative Calfee moves passage of Senate Bill 1521 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Calfee, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I think this is a bill that should have been done quite a few years ago. It's a student's right to know. It explains about the colleges, the community colleges, the universities, the TCATs, and the military, and what it costs to go to TCATs and community colleges and universities, and what you, if you successfully complete, what you're going to be eligible to do, and what kind of money you can make, so you know up front what you're spending, what the end result is. And it also addresses enlistment bonuses to the military and what careers are available in and after the military.
Chairman Calfee renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I appreciate and support your bill and will be voting for it. And I think it's a worthwhile thing. But I also want to point out again that unfortunately, the costs continue to go up for a lot of our institutions of higher education in the state. And we continue to have laws on the books that take away professional licenses for people who are behind on their student loans. And so I know it was referenced earlier on a previous bill, and I want to get into that. But when someone might find themselves behind on student debt and student loans for various reasons, and they might take out loans to go to one of these institutions, they might find themselves in a situation where they no longer can work in that profession because they can't get that professional license. And so I know it was referenced earlier, a list of on the state website of different professions. Most of those professions that were named, you've got to have a license for. And so I appreciate what you're doing, but I think we need to really continue to look at this issue of student loans and people who fall behind on those student loans and get into debt and default on their loans, because in this state, in a lot of cases, they then lose their professional license. But I appreciate what you're doing. I just, think that that's an important issue, and hopefully we can work together on that. And I want to remind the body of that problem that exists in this state. So thank you.
Representative Calfee, anything? No, sir. Any discussion?
Renew my motion.
All right. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1521, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, one nay.
Senate Bill 1521, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 22 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to drag racing. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0014.
Representative Gillespie moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 14 without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on Senate Bill 0014 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 14 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Gillespie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it will increase the penalty for organized street racing or drag racing from its current Class B misdemeanor to a Class A misdemeanor. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say this is actually one of the most important pieces of legislation for my district in particular. So I'm proud to support it, proud to co-sponsor it. One of the byproducts, unfortunately, of the pandemic has been not as many people on the roads and on the streets in the state of Tennessee. But unfortunately, in some parts of the state, people have taken it upon themselves to drag race and drive through neighborhoods at ridiculously high speeds. And this is a significant issue that puts lives at risk, puts children in danger. I've had constituents contact me about this issue all year. And I think we need to send a clear message to people to say that we need to respect the speed limits in this state. We need to respect people that live in our communities and respect the roads that go through our neighborhoods, because this has become a very serious issue in my district and here in Nashville, and I know it's a significant issue in Memphis. And so I really appreciate this piece of legislation because, again, and you can go, and I don't want to encourage people to promote this, but you go online and look. There are literally organized drag racing events that are taking place in the state of Tennessee, and people are coming from out of state to hold these drag racing and spin out and burn out, and it's out of control. And I want to send a message that if this continues, we need to increase what we're doing to crack down on this drag racing in our communities, because this is a significant issue. People should be able to live in their house, enjoy their property, and not have to worry about somebody coming down the road so fast they could kill themselves or kill somebody that's just going about their daily lives. So thank you very much. I'm proud to co-sponsor this. I hope everybody will vote for this bill. It's a very important piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield, rise in support of the bill. When we speak of organized drag racing, for example, in Memphis, what do we have? The motorsports park. Would it would that be considered as organized on that property, drag racing?
Representative Gillespie.
Are you saying in a track?
Representative Miller.
Correct.
Representative Gillespie.
No, sir. This is on public roads and like private parking lots.
Representative Miller.
Thank you.
Chairman White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to thank the sponsor and concur with what was just said. This says we got to get the attention of these people who are doing this. In Memphis, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw on a Facebook where they had actually stopped traffic on I-240 right at Walnut Grove. And if you're familiar with Memphis, this is a major intersection. You get off the exit and a block away is a major hospital, Baptist East. They had the interstate blocked down doing spin outs and donuts in this area. We have got to get their attention, and whatever the penalty needs to be, the penalty needs to be. So thank you for supporting this.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you.
Chairman Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also in support of this bill. In my county, we've had a couple incidents about drag racing that have killed some people. But the reason I rise for this bill is particularly is several years ago, in the early 90s, my niece requested a ride home from one of her friends. And so she got in the car, and the other person that was in the other car, they decided they'd drag race. And she was only going down the road about less than a mile. She never made it home. They struck a tree. It killed her instantly. So in testimony, the young man testified that he was trying to take her home, but he did get into racing and drag racing, and it cost a life. And this bill here now will put more teeth into it and make something happen that did not happen several years ago in my life. And with that, Mr. Speaker and Madam Sponsor, thank you for the bill.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield. Mr. Sponsor, I think you hear the climate of the floor and what people think about the bill. And I too have witnessed this kind of madness across the state and across the community that I frequent. And it's scary. It's really scary. But it's just not organized. You have these copycats, these young boys with these fast cars, these copycats doing 110 miles an hour on the expressway. My colleague from Shelby County talked about what he's seen. I witnessed that as well. Some time ago, I'd love to have you involved in this. I worked on a bill to try to take the car and the license and to put them in jail. If you're not going to be orderly and civilized on these roads, because those become lethal weapons. They're missiles. They're big, multi-caliber bullets when they hit you. And it takes your life just like that. Unfortunately, I too have lost young friends, not even in the prime of their lives, to this madness. If you want to be a drag racer, go train and get out and do it in an organized way and get paid for it, but not on our streets. There has to be no tolerance for this kind of madness because it is very serious. So with that, I'm glad to bring the bill. Love to have your support in the future. I'm working on something that's a little bit more strenuous. I just don't think we're going forward enough, but I think it's a great step. Mr. Speaker, sponsor, thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Faison, you want to be recognized for what purpose at Deputy Speaker Johnson's? Representative Calfee, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I know we're out of order, but we've got our little man Sawyer with us. And a couple of things I want to say about him. We have custody of him because the parents have some issues. And this is the other face of our drug problem in Tennessee. Not the pockmark, not the missing teeth, not the mug shots, but this is the other face of drugs in Tennessee. Thank you.
Out of order. Representative Travis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 14 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted. Does any member wish to change their vote? Representative Lamar is excused. Mr. Clerk, take the vote, please.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 14, having received the constitutional majority, everybody declare pass without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, I know I'm out of order, but I have some community leaders up here in the gallery. If you'd make them feel welcome, Ms. Karen Spencer McGee is there, and Salamander, make them feel welcome.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1044 by Representative Hall and others relative to the Tennessee Public Utility Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 242.
Representative Hall moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 242, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the passage of Senate Bill 242 on its third and final consideration.
Representative Hall moves passage of Senate Bill 242 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized. Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Are you talking about exact? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so our sponsor is going to explain it to us a little bit more. At this point in time, I wearily move to adopt. Are we substituting conforming? We're wearily moving to withdraw. I apologize.
Chairman Vaughn moves apologetically to withdraw amendment number 1 without objection. So ordered. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, there are 5 members on the Public Utilities Commission. This will increase it by 2 to the total number of 7. Also, it will extend the time frame from 30 to 90 days to fill those appointments. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hall renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 242, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, 3 nays.
Senate Bill 242, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 713 by Representative Hurt.
Representative Hurt, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask to roll this bill 15 places, please.
Without objection, roll 15 places. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 9 by Representative Reedy relative to the locksmith licensing act of 2006. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 12.
Representative Reedy moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 12 without objection. So ordered. Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 12 on third and final consideration.
Representative Reedy moves passage of Senate Bill 12 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Reedy renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, you know, I know we've discussed this in committee and everything, and I had some issues, and I hate to say it, I still have a couple of issues. I know I like a lot of the bill. I know the licensing requirements are maybe too stringent, and I agree with you on that. But basically, the way I read this, it totally deregulates the locksmith profession. And in my view, the locksmith profession needs at least some regulation. I mean, this is a profession where, you know, you can enter my house, you can enter my car, you have the skills to do this. And we need to have some kind of required qualifications, it would seem like, for this. But The way I read this, it basically wipes out all those qualifications, including you can have a former felon who is a burglar or a car thief or something like that be able to become a locksmith later. And I am very uncomfortable about that. So those are my biggest concerns right now. And if that's the case, that is definitely the case, I still can't support the bill.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the point, when the locksmith law was put into place 2006, 2007, we had 5,000 licensed locksmiths. In 2016, that went down. The number was 377. 2020, it's 345. 2021, 299. So there are folks already out there across the state in our neighborhoods doing this profession. And members, since this law was put into place, I helped put it into place. I worked with Commerce and Insurance for the last 6 years discussing how to make this the best locksmith bill in the country, and we came up with zero. Members, I do carry an identification card that shows I am a professional locksmith. How many of you can guess how many times somebody has asked to see that identification? Zero. When you make that phone call, you don't care. Every month when there's 4 locksmith associations across the state, and monthly we would meet over in Hermitage and we'd talk about how do we make this law better by increasing enforcement. Once again, working with Commerce and Insurance, unless we were willing to spend a lot of states' money to enforce this law, it was going nowhere. So the associations got with me and said, Representative Reedy, there's 14 states that do it. Tennessee is one of them. No state is enforcing the law. Let's just take it off the books. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you. And I think I agree with everything you just said, but I still think we need something to prevent certain people from being locksmiths in the state. No, we need more locksmiths, but some people don't need to be locksmiths. And I'll have to oppose it if it's intact like it is. If you would want to maybe alter it a little bit to add a little bit more a teensy bit of regulation in, that would be great.
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we've been talking about this same issue since 2007. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, I would think that with like any profession, that someone that is going to go out and advertise that they are a locksmith, that they would have a business license, that they would carry insurance, liability insurance. And so by repealing this, what we're doing, we're not taking those parts that a business owner would do away. We're just taking some of this red tape off in what we're doing. So I fully support you and thank you. You've been working on this for a couple of years, so thank you.
Representative Reedy. Comments. Very good. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for previous question.
For a first year, he did pretty well, didn't he? Previous question been called. Any objection? Without objection. All those in favor of Senate Bill 12, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, none nays.
Senate Bill 12, having received the Constitution majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 761 by Representative Sparks and others relative to taxation of gun safes and gun safety devices. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 551.
Representative Sparks moves to substitute conform to Senate Bill 551, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this passage of Senate Bill 551 on third and final consideration.
Representative Sparks moves passage of Senate Bill 551 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could, I'd like to ask for many of my co-sponsors to come up here. If they don't mind. I know I've got a lot of folks on here. I appreciate Chair Lady Hazelwood and Chairman Hicks helping us on this bill, as well as Leader Lamberth and Chairman Faison and others. I think it's very important. I think it's a step to help curb some of the gun violence that we're seeing, especially in some of the urban areas. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Sparks renews his motion. Any discussion? Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Sparks, this is a great idea. I'm glad you thought of it. I appreciate you coming up with this idea. Thank you very much for this bill.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Representative Sparks, you can close.
Well, I invited Bo to come up here. Where is Bo at? Bo, you're supposed to come up here with me, brother. I asked you earlier. Don't be scared. No, this is a good bill, and I appreciate Bo ran it, I think, last year and couldn't pass it. And so it is important. It is important. But, you know, in all seriousness, folks, we do have a severe gun violence problem in our state. And I do think it's a step in the right direction. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I heard your inflection, but I didn't open it up. Your member did. So just so I'm clear, a good Democrat ran this bill last year. Y'all killed it. And now the Republican is running it and y'all gonna pass it. Same thing happened with naming, image, and likeness student athletes, right? A good Democrat ran it for the last 5 or 6 years, and a Republican ran it this year, and y'all passed it. But the same Republican killed it last year when I had it. Bill jacking is prevalent in this chamber. Yes, and we should run legislation, and Mr. Speaker, maybe you'll have a Republican run some legislation that makes bill jacking punishable by a fine, because it's prevalent in this chamber. But thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence, and I guess to the sponsor, it's a good bill. It was a good bill last year too, though, and thank you for I guess jacking my colleague and passing the bill. Thank you.
Representative Hogg, I think you have a historical perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We learned from the best 20 years ago when the Democrats were in control. So we got it all figured out. Thank you very much.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, did I see your hand, or Leader Lamberth? No, Leader Lamberth.
Move previous question.
Previous question be called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 551, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 551 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 513 by Leader Gant.
Leader Gant, you are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to roll House Bill 513 to the heel of Wednesday's calendar.
Without objection, roll to the hill of Wednesday's calendar. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 130 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 114.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 114, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 114 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 114 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Vice Chairman Baum moves to withdraw amendment number 1. So ordered. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by thanking at least 2/3, if not more, of this chamber and our friends across the hall as well have signed on to this bill. This is a bill that many of us have been working on for, I've been here, this is my 7th year. I've worked on it every year that I've been here, and I know that others had begun that work even before then. But what we're doing with this bill is raising the pay for the folks who support, who take care of our developmentally and intellectually disabled Tennesseans, our DSP providers, from $10 an hour to $12.50 an hour. And I'm telling you, you're not going to get any ticker tape parades for voting for this. You're not going to make the front page of the paper, but you're going to make a difference in people's lives. Both the people whose salaries are going to be raised through this bill, but even more so those that they care for. This is very difficult to keep people at the wages that we've been paying to care for these folks. And if you can imagine being dependent on someone to help you with your most intimate and personal needs, and having the person that you're relying on be a revolving door, this is going to help stabilize that. This is going to help make sure that the folks are taken care of in even a more professional and personal way. And it's going to make a huge difference in the lives of the families of those providers. These folks, many of them are working 2 and 3 jobs just to feed their families. And I want to tell you, this has been a personal mission for me. And this is a great win. It's a battle that we've won. It's not the war. We still have a long way to go, because our ultimate goal is to get this to the point that we could make sure they are at a living wage, and then we could tie their wage increase for these DSPs to those of our state employees. We don't want to tie it there now because, frankly, it's too low. But we want to keep working on it. And I tell you, I thank you again for those of you who have stood beside me, helped get this through. And again, on behalf of those folks who are going to benefit from this in the state, and I tell you, it's a mission for me. I had an uncle who was developmentally and intellectually disabled. My grandmother on her deathbed, and I was there, she had had a stroke. She couldn't communicate. But we could figure out what she was talking or about what she was concerned about. And that was who was going to take care of her son, my uncle. My mother committed to do that. And my mother, with my father's help, had him in their home for 25 years until his death. And it was difficult. The last few years, there were just a lot of physical challenges for my mom and for my dad. It was difficult on relationships. It was a very difficult time and a difficult thing, but my uncle had my mother to take care of him. Not everybody has that. This will make sure that people who are in that position get adequate care. And I am so proud to have brought this, and I'm so proud to join you in supporting this bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would renew my motion.
Chairlady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for the work on this bill. The thing I appreciate the most is that you say you're going to continue to work on it, that it needs to be higher. And I agree with that. And I just appreciate the work so much. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 114 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Miller, aye. Camper, aye. Towns, aye. I think that got it. Garrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 114 having received constitutional majority, everybody declare pass without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 975 by Chairman Williams, relative to taxes.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on third and final consideration of House Bill 975.
Chairman Williams moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and I defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As you may have seen in the news recently, NASCAR intends to bring racing back to the historic fairgrounds at Motor Speedway here in Davidson County. This legislation allows for those races and related events to be held at the fairgrounds to be treated, and those events will be treated in the same manner as the other sports-related facilities in the state as it relates to their tax structures. This authorizes these events to participate and be included in the same laws in regards to sales tax, local option sales tax, and local seat privilege tax. The revenue generated from this bill will allow the Metropolitan Board of Fair Commissioners to properly maintain and develop the Speedway. With that description of the bill as amended, Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a great bill. I appreciate you bringing this bill. I'm looking forward to expanding racing in District 58.
Chair Williams, anything? Oh, once, twice. Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor, House Bill 975 is amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, 3 nays, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 975 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1522 by Leader Gant and others relative to commerce. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1552.
Leader Gant moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1552, probably second without objection. So ordered. Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1552 on third and final consideration.
Leader Gant moves passage of Senate Bill 1552 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, go up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is brought by our Speaker, Speaker Sexton. The Tennessee Invesco program was established by the General Assembly in 2010 and was designed to increase flow of capital to innovative new companies in Tennessee in early stages of development. The return of investment for the state has been underwhelming, and the statutory end of the program is approaching. Statute requires ECD to liquidate the remaining investment starting December 31st, 2021, but does not adequately define the liquidation process. In short, this legislation encourages liquidation of the outstanding investments by the end of 2023, effectively ending the program without forcing a fire sale that would devalue the remaining investments. I renew my motion.
Leader Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Mr. Speaker, come back to me after Miller, please.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Yes.
My understanding, are we speaking of eliminating the program in 2023, or are we going to extend it?
Leader Gant.
It ends the program effectively in 2023.
Representative Miller.
The next question is, why, if we've been so successful with the investment returns, are we eliminating the program?
Leader Gant.
The General Assembly passed language in 2014 requiring ECD to liquidate the remaining assets beginning December 31st, 2021. This amendment provides necessary detail on how the liquidation process should occur in order to maximize the state's return on the outstanding investments. These investments were made about a decade ago, and the Tennessee Invescos have been aware that the wind down process was required to begin December 31st, 2021.
Representative Miller.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you for the bill. Invesco is the biggest ripoff that's happened since I've been here. A bunch of venture capitalists using taxpayer dollars, and there's no transparency, no accountability. So I thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Gant, for getting rid of that fraudulent program. And those folks who took the money need to be paying all of it back. Mr. Speaker, that's the next thing for you to tackle. Invesco was a fraud. And all of those venture capitalists that are running around with taxpayer dollars in their pockets, pretending like they invested them in some type of venture that was going to provide returns on the investment, it's a lie. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my good friend from Rutherford County up here just pointed out, the original caption for this bill consists of a mention of a nonprofit production of sheep. So I was just curious if there was some story the speaker wanted to share with us about the nonprofit production of sheep.
I don't think that applies to Davidson County. Leader Gant.
I renew my motion.
Any further discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of Senate Bill 1552 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Ramsey, aye. Towns, aye. Oh, okay. Hang on. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 1552, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion for reconsider is tabled. Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Point of personal privilege. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I just happened to look up in the balcony and saw one of our constituents here, and I have to acknowledge her, especially coming here during this very inclement tornadic weather earlier in the day. Anybody that would come here and want to watch us today need to be acknowledged. I see Miss Amber Sherman in the balcony. Amber, stand up and wave at us. Want y'all to make her feel welcome. One of our good community people. And she's out of Orange Mound, but you can move to my district. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members.
Thank you. Ms. Clerk, call up next bill, please.
House Bill 865 by Chairman Haston and others, relative to instructional salaries and wages. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1338.
Chairman Haston moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1338. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1338 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hasty moves passage of Senate Bill 1338 on third and final consideration by second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill would do would make it where the state minimum salary schedule for teachers would match percentage increases in the BEP instructional salary component. Would also be applied to the teacher salaries that are at the state minimum salary. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and I renew my motion.
Chairman Haston renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1338, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member cast your vote, as every member wish to change their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 1338 having received constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1501 by Representative Cochran and others relative to kindergarten through grade 12 education. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0122.
Representative Cochran moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 122, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0122 on third and final consideration.
Representative Cochran moves passage of Senate Bill 122 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what this bill establishes is the school turnaround program. It's a pilot program where we're going to look at 5 priority schools, which those are the lowest performing schools. This is an effort to keep those schools off of the achievement school district, keeps them it keeps them in a program where there's local buy-in. It provides state-funded training for teachers in those schools in an attempt, hopefully, to get those schools off of the priority list. This is a 4-year pilot program, and then we will evaluate the results at that time. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Cochran renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Certainly.
Sponsor, is this program while the schools are still under the supervision of the LEAs to try to bring them out of this position?
Representative Cochran.
Representative, yes, sir, it is. That this would be stepping in while those schools are still under the control of the LEAs, and that they put together a school turnaround. It's a plan. And so the LEA actually appoints a committee to put together that plan, and it consists of teachers, parents, school board members. So it's a program that the LEA actually has a big part in, and then they actually select a service to help provide this training, and then the state will pay for this. And again, if they do not come off of that priority list, which, as you mentioned, that's the goal, is to get them off the priority list, then the organization that comes in to provide that training, they do not get paid their full contract if they do not make it off the priority list. So it's a pay for performance.
Representative Beck.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. The 1.25 million budgeted, is that for the entire 4-year project, or is that for each year?
Representative Cochran.
Representative Beck, that would be for the entire program.
Representative Beck.
I wish we could have put more resources behind that program. I think it's going to be a very good value for the money. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 122 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 12 names.
Senate Bill 122 received a constitutional majority, hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1080 by Sexton and Granger, relative to medical professionals. Mr. Speaker, we're on the House bill.
Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1080 on the third and final consideration.
Chairman Sexton moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1, filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment clarifies sunset language in the bill to avoid conflicts in statute. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does, it creates a physician's assistant board, and they're the only one right now that doesn't have, under the TCA Title 63, they don't have their own board. And so this would establish that. It puts 7 physician's assistants, 1 physician, and 1 consumer member on this board. So with that explanation, I renew my motion.
Chairman Sexton renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1080 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays, 1 present,
House
unvoted.
Bill 1080 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1102 by Representative Shaw, relative to expunction. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0707.
Representative Shaw moves substitute form to Senate Bill 707, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage, that is, of Senate Bill 0707 on third and final consideration.
Representative Shaw moves passage of 707 Senate Bill on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is not the same as Senate Amendment number 1, and the committee amendment makes the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment seeks to provide for a person who's been convicted of Class A misdemeanor, an assault offense under Title 39. It seeks to make them eligible for judicial conversion at the time of their sentencing. And I move passage of the amendment.
Representative Shaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 707 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 707 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Members, this will be the last bill on this calendar. Once we finish this, we will move to the consent calendar, then we will move to the message calendar, and then we will be done for the evening. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1267 by Representative Gillespie relative to the duties of Sports Wagering Advisory Council. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0588.
Representative Gillespie moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 588, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of Senate Bill 0588 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 588 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is the same as the Senate amendment, and so we move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is currently the Board of Directors of the Tennessee Education Lottery Corporation enforce and supervise all compliance regarding sports wagering in the state. And there is currently a sports wagering advisory board, and what it does is allows the sports wagering advisory board sole authority in the regulation of sports wagering in the state. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 588 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 73, 13 nay, 4 present, I voted.
Senate Bill 588, having received constitutional majority, everybody declare it passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Mr. Clerk. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to take up consent calendar number 2.
Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with my colleagues sitting around me, I move passage of consent calendar on 2 on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of consent calendar number 2, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objection has been filed.
Mr. Speaker, item 1, House Resolution 110, has been objected to by Chairman Top.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with both leaders, I move that Representative Mike Carter be listed as the prime sponsor on HJR 627.
Without objection, so ordered. Anyone else seeking recognition? Seeing none. We're voting on the consent calendar 2. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Hardaway's an aye. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Littleton, aye. Carringer, aye. Towns, aye. Vaughn. Vaughn, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Having received constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Make a motion to take up the message calendar.
Without objection, message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 1 on message calendar 1, House Bill 13 by Chairman Keesling and others relative to public health. Mr. Speaker, on April 28, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 13 for Senate Bill 187, adopted Amendment 1, and reset House Bill 13. On April 29, 2021, the Senate further considered House Bill 13, adopted Amendment 3, and passed House Bill 13 as amended.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment numbers 1 and 3 on behalf of Chairman Hulsey.
Yeah, no.
Chairman Keesling moves to concur in Senate Amendments number 1 and 3, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendments? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendments 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Carringer, aye. Take your vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 83, 7 nays.
Senate Amendments 1 and 3 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 210 by Representative Carringer relative to education curriculum. Mr. Speaker, on April 19, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 210 for Senate Bill 1147, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 210 as amended.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to non-concur in Senate Amendment number 1.
Without objection, we non-concur. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 511 by Leader Gant and others relative to criminal offenses. Mr. Speaker, on April 29, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 841 for Senate Bill 841, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 841 as amended.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 2.
Representative Gant moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you just tell us what this bill does as amended?
Leader Gant, what does Amendment number 2 do, please?
It excludes juveniles from this legislation.
Representative Stewart.
And what now does the legislation with the juveniles excluded include? What does this legislation do?
Leader Gant.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand this question.
Representative Stewart.
Just summarize what the bill does. If this bill passes right now, what will it accomplish?
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the question you have is, what does House Bill 511 initially do?
Representative Stewart.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you in the trick box, just a quick explanation. I just wanted to make sure we knew what we're voting on.
Leader Gant.
This is the one where if you target law enforcement, first responder, it leaves two options for sentencing guidelines: life in prison without parole and the death penalty.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Reagan, aye. Camper, aye. Ramsey, aye. Miller, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91 nay.
Senate Amendment 2, having received constitutional majority, everybody declare concurred in without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 570 by Chairman Reagan relative to administrative procedure. Mr. Speaker, on April 29, 2021, the Senate appointed a conference committee.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move we adopt a conference committee report and make it the action of the House. But before we vote on that, a brief explanation is in order. If you remember, House Bill 570 came through here, and we all supported it as a constitutional issue, meaning that rules that were passed and not approved could go into effect even over the objections of the Government Operations Committee. House Bill 570 stopped that by putting the ability to put the stay in beyond just 75 days all the way to the 5th legislative day. The Senate amendment adds briefly to that. The first stay would be to the 90-day point put on by either house, and then after that could be extended by by agreement with Senate and House to the 5th legislative day. It still prevents rules from going into effect without approval of the Government Operations Committee in the joint sense. With that explanation, I move we make it the action of the House.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of the Conference Committee report and make it the action of the House. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of the Conference Committee report, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Powell, aye. Mitchell, aye. Miller, aye. Camper, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
The Conference Committee report having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted and made the action of the House without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1046 by Chairman Zachary and others relative to the Department of General Services. Mr. Speaker, on April 29, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1046 for Senate Bill 993, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 1046 as amended.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment 1.
Chairman Zachary moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I saw one of my colleagues asking, what is this? What are we doing?
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are changing one word from administered to negotiating.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. Motion reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1268 by Chair Lady Littleton relative to the Department of Children's Services. Mr. Speaker, on April 29, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1268 for Senate Bill 1145, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1268 as amended.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Littleton moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. Motion reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1401 by Representative Cochran relative to the General Assembly. Mr. Speaker, on April 29, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1401 for Senate Bill 1400, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 1401 as amended.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 2.
Representative Cochran moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, sir.
Tell us exactly what the Senate did for us in that amendment.
Representative Cochran.
Yeah, so essentially what this bill addresses, it's sort of just it was an odd little nuance in the law where if a member happened to fly here rather than drive, this allows them to get that mileage reimbursement. So that the Senate, that they tweaked a couple of things on that reimbursement as well. As far as like being able to do the Nashville per diem rate, things like that. So the big purpose of this bill, though, was to ensure that we could, if a member were to fly, they could get the road mileage reimbursement to actually travel to Nashville. Again, it was a strange nuance in the law, but this corrects that.
Representative Beck.
And then for those other than people within 50 miles, this changed the per diem rate. Is that correct?
Representative Cochran.
One big thing it does for those within the 50-mile radius, I think currently you are not able to get paid if you travel here on a Friday, which again is just kind of another strange little nuance there. It fixes that, where if you have to come here on Friday for office work, you can get reimbursed for that as well.
Representative Beck.
Very good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does this increase our office allowance as well?
Representative Cochran.
The Senate amendment does. Yes, that's correct.
Representative Hodges.
Thank you. And so what I would say that's why I'll be voting against this bill. I just think that we just cut Tennesseans' unemployment, and now we're essentially going to give ourselves a pay raise, guys. I just don't think that looks good. So,
Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, what's the effective date if this passes? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cochran.
Chairman, that would be during the next term.
Leader Lambert.
So the inaccurate statement that was just said has absolutely nothing to do with this bill. You would have to run for re-election and actually achieve that goal in order for anything in this bill to affect you. If you are unsuccessful, then it obviously would not.
Representative Parkinson.
Move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 12 nays.
Senate Amendment number 2, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes message calendar 1.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to take up item number 3 on the on message calendar 2.
Without objection, item number 3. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 3, Senate Bill 623, by Chairman Reagan and others, relative to the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, on May 4, 2021, the Senate non-concurred in House Amendment number 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we refuse to recede from our actions in adopting amendment number 2.
Without objection, we refuse to recede. Leader Lambert.
8.
Members, there's 2 on this message calendar that we're refusing to rescind, so we're going to go ahead and do that. The other ones, I think we're concurring, so we're going to do those tomorrow. And then after this, we have one more bill, then we will be done. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, I move that we take up item number 8 on House message calendar 2.
Chairman Terry, you are recognized. Oh, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, 1171 by Representative Terry relative to handgun permits. Mr. Speaker, on May 4, 2021, Senate substituted House Bill 1171 for Senate Bill 1142, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 1171 as amended.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to non-concur in Senate Amendment number 2.
Without objection, we non-concur. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in honor of the member's birthday, if we can take up HJR number 80 on the House regular calendar.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that's item 53 on today's regular calendar. Item 53, Senate Joint Resolution 80 by Representative Towns and others, a resolution to propose an amendment to Article 1, Section 33 of the Constitution of Tennessee to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the resolution, Senate Joint Resolution 80, be read for its third and final time, sir.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution, please.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Joint Resolution 80 on its third and final reading, a resolution to propose an amendment to Article 1, Section 33 of the Constitution of Tennessee to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude. Whereas Senate Joint Resolution number 159 of the 111th General Assembly, which proposed amendment of Article 1 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to prohibiting slavery and involuntary servitude, was considered and agreed upon by a majority of all the members elected to each house of the two houses, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals. And whereas such resolution proposing such amendment was published in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, and whereas freedom from slavery and involuntary servitude is a right of every individual within the United States and any place subject to its jurisdiction, which right is secured by the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And whereas the Tennessee General Assembly ratified the 13th Amendment in April 1865, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that a 2/3 majority of all the members of each house concurring, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals, that it is proposed that Article 1, Section 33 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by deleting the section and substituting instead the following. Section 33, slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. Nothing in this section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime. Be it further resolved that in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, the foregoing proposed amendment shall be submitted to the people at the next general election in which a governor is to be chosen, the same being the 2022 November general election, and the Secretary of State is directed to place such proposed amendment on the ballot for that election. Be it further resolved that the clerk of the Senate is directed to deliver copies of this resolution to the Secretary of State, with this final resolving clause being deleted from such copies.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And members, this bill was actually passed last year. We were ahead of the Senate, and unfortunately, the Senate was not able to do it. This year, the Senate beat us. And so we are concluding it again this year. I want to thank all of the members that have participated in this process and made this happen. It's been explained excellently as to what it really does, seeks to do, and that's just simply eliminate a clause in the Constitution that will forever just eliminate the conversation about slavery and involuntary servitude. And as already been stated as well, has nothing to do with an individual being required to work if they are incarcerated and during that time. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker and members, I move to concur in SJR 80 for the third and final time, sir.
Representative Town moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 80. Any discussion? Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I've not understood this entire time that this has been running through committee why we're doing this. The prohibition against slavery is already in our Constitution. There's no need to rewrite this. As a matter of fact, I'll quote two of your colleagues from Shelby County. Enough is enough. Let's stop tampering with the Constitution. It's a good Constitution, one of the best, but we continue year after year amending it for all the wrong reasons. And the second, I don't understand why we keep trifling with the Constitution. Every time we have a statutory issue, we run and decide that we're going to maim the Constitution. I don't know what happened to the respect for the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the input. And I mean, as we shared in committee meetings, there's some terminology that I really think is an oversight that just has to be clarified, I think. And as it states that condition of servitude exists based upon a certain condition. If you are incarcerated and you're serving time, it could be considered that. As we have already talked about on the floor today, that's been a really bad stain on our country. And under no circumstances should we ever want this to be even interpreted that it exists. And it is simply, in my opinion, this is simply was an oversight, and think we're cleaning it up. And I agree with you. The Constitution is very sacred. We all respect it. It's that document that binds us, and I don't think that we should just often go into there. But at some points in time, but it's something that has been with us for such a very, very long time, we have to go in and just straighten things out just a little bit. And this is obviously something that I've never done. It's something that never thought I would have to do, but I find myself at this point in time having to address it in just a very minor way. And I thank you again for your input. I do respect it.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I agree with your preamble. I think it's very good language, but I don't agree with the language in the amendment. Slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited in this state, is what our Constitution currently says. Then it goes on to say, but except as punishment for crime. Now, we do pay prisoners for work in prison, but our Constitution does say, as punishment for crime, we don't have to, but we do, because we are a decent people. Is your intent to in any way ensure that any prisoner who asks to work must be given a job? Because we have work programs and they are wonderful. But unfortunately, right now, we don't have enough providers to provide a work program for every prisoner. But if somebody did sue on their behalf, our jails, our county jails, or our prisons, they could run up against a great cost trying to provide a job for every prisoner who wants one, or just every prisoner. Is that your intent by modifying this language as slightly as it's being modified?
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And here again, thank you for that inquiry. And we have heard it. And this language comes from the Department of Correction. This bill has been here for a couple of years and trying to get it right. That particular language was inserted with us working with the Department of Correction. That has no bearing on anyone working and us having to try to provide jobs for those that may want to work. Obviously, I'm from, a different time and era where young men are expected to work. But this does not say that you have to provide a job for them if there's no work there. The Department of Corrections is going to be still running their shop, and they run their shop. We're not dictating how their shop is ran, but we did get the input from them on this particular piece of language. It did not come from me exactly. It came from them because we wanted to make sure in committee last year that we had it right. And I trust the Department of Correction, and I thank them for participating and helping us get it tweaked like that.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually think that the first sentence in your proposal, that slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited, is perfect. And we don't need the second sentence, because I am concerned that the second sentence might imply that maybe we would pay prisoners minimum wage or maybe a given wage that somebody who is filing a lawsuit thinks that they should be paid. And I know that's not your intent. And you told us in committee that is not your intent. But we never know what someone who files a lawsuit, what kind of angle they may have. So that is my only concern. I do feel that effectively, the language that's in our Constitution is very similar to your proposed change. And because I am concerned about a lawsuit, I am going to vote against this, and only for that reason, because I'm concerned that there could be a lawsuit at some date in the future. I do think, as I said, the current Constitution reads well, and the first sentence of your proposal is perfect. But it's the second sentence that causes me consternation. And just for that reason only, I will be voting against it. But thank you very much.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you again. And thank you as well for that. And as we've indicated earlier, people that are incarcerated, obviously, they're not considered as people with favored status. And I think that that members that are in our Attorney General's office and the people that are here, they're very smart. We have some smart people that take care of us. We have very smart people that are bureaucrats here, been here for years. They're smart in many ways, far more than the members. And from my understanding, we've talked with the Attorney General's office, and we're not worried about there being some lawsuits. However, you live in America, and anything you can file a lawsuit on a chicken sandwich if you want to. However, I think we can win, and I don't see that as a threat to what it is that we're doing. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I renew my motion.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a call for the question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 80, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 2 nay, 2 present, not voting.
After being read 3 times on 3 separate days, Senate Joint Resolution 80, having received a vote in the affirmative by 2/3 majority of the members of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly, I hereby declare it concurred in pursuant to Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, here again, let me emphatically stress how appreciative I am from the members of the committee, the chair people, yourself, those that were here last year that helped us get this done, and for all of you all that are participating this year, as well as the healthy debate and different perspectives on it. But thank you all, one and all, very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, hang on tight real quick. We got to make a motion or two and then let you know what tomorrow looks like. If everything goes well, you may be done tomorrow. You notice how softly I said that, right? As we wait on the motion, Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with both leaders, I move the rules to be suspended for immediate introduction and consideration of HAR 636.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
House Joint Resolution 636 by Representative Powell, resolution to honor Dr. H. Keith Johnson, founder of Dialysis Clinic Incorporated.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HAR 636.
Representative Powell moves adoption of House Joint Resolution 636. Probably second. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 636 say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare it adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Ogles, do you want to do yours while we're waiting? Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw HJR 140 from the committee and the House.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And after consultation with the Minority Leader, I move that House Bill 112 and House Bill 432 be heard in Finance, Ways and Means Subcommittee this week.
You heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right. Mr. Clerk, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to announce the schedule for tomorrow. The schedule for tomorrow is as follows. Finance Sub will meet in the morning at 8:30 a.m. That's Finance Sub, 8:30 a.m. Finance Full immediately following Finance Sub. Calendar Rules immediately following Full Finance. That would put us back on the floor for a floor session at 11:30 a.m.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as a reminder, tomorrow, Senator Harper's body will be lying in state at the Legislative Library from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. And those members who are on the receiving team, if you don't know who you are, I will see you in a few minutes. But let us be, again, respectful for the family as we come in. Please go by and give some support for the family. They'll be there from 2 until 10 p.m. I'm sorry, 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Representative John DeBerry will be the guest speaker in the morning at 7:30 in House Hearing Room 3 for the morning devotion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, May 5th, 2021.
The House stands in recess till 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, without objection.